Yana, which is number 12 of the Eka level. That's the whole set of 12 up above this that goes with the Eka worlds and the Rishaic shield. All right. But that's not all they're giving us. There'd be more columns here if this was a bigger diagram, but when this was made, we only knew this much. Right? Next, you'd have the 12 scepter codes. All right. And by the way, in your other books, where it says vehicles here, this should be postures. That was a misprint on there. These are vehicles, the Ekas are postures. Just technicality. But over here, you'd have the scepter codes, which is the next level up into the Akasha level. We've been given 12. Scepter code 12, which is the El Hayalea, or El Hayale code. When you activate the 12, it sets in motion activation of all the ones below it. So they're going to be activating this part that we don't even see yet, this list, over here by activating its number 12. It's going to activate all of the Eka codes by using the Riyanayana code. And we're going to get this one, which will set in motion the rest of these activations. But we need to manually put these into the shields to give the anchoring rod for these higher frequencies that are going to be running down on their own pace. In the Dance for Joy program, the final phase of this program, God knows what that's going to have in it. At the rate this is going, it's all right, God. We'll be getting the Shahaya and the Oramanu, which is the solid programming code. All right, that's the base 12 for the templates of what we call molecular or atomic solids. All right, ought to be interesting to see what we can learn how to do once we have the ability to run the base 12 back into solid and liquid atomic structure that has been mutated for 25,500 years. I just can't even imagine yet what I would even do if I knew I had the power to do that. You just think, what would I fix first? You know. Maybe an ocean, maybe myself. Yeah, I'll start there. So, anyway, this is the correspondence of these. Number 1, let's find it. I think number 1 and 6 and something else. Yeah, number 1 opens the D12 center lock. So there's a D12 lock in there. It's at the center. It's lock number 4. Code number 6 opens the D13 center lock, number 4. Code number 11 opens the inner lock number 1, the inner Eka. I'll show that one in a minute too. But I do want to show something. These lines that go across here, they show the correspondences between the locks in the dimensional fields and the light bodies, and it's these codes that correspond with those. So when you use, like, say, 4 and 9, the 4-9 combination, 4 and 9, it would release this set of locks, which would apply to, So these it's a bit complex to explain. It's even a bit complex to see, actually, with all these. You should have seen drawn these. It was just amazing. I don't know how I survived that period of my life, but I did. Where do I put squares? Where do I put diamonds? I ran out of shapes to use. How if you're doing it in black and white and you need to say, okay, well, things that are in squares are this, and things that are in circles are that, things that are in diamonds are that. I was like needing to get creative at a certain point because there are other things to show that needed numbers in them, and there were no other shapes I could think of to use. We didn't have any yet, though, with hearts, though. So I have to think of that. Anyway, just to show you that these spots that correspond to the gates as well. It means if you want to go through all of these gates to get into here, you have to release all of the codes that go with it. You have to activate your primal light fields, you have to activate your dimensional field, and your parallel and its light field, which means you need to release all of these codes, because once they release, and again, they're in your shields. Remember how they're in your shields. Once you activate those in the shields, there's a spinning thing that takes place, and there is a natural rolling up of the frequencies where they all blend in together, the radial body levels blend in together, and just like we spiraled out into manifestation here, we spiraled out into manifestation in our system on a counterclockwise moving system, because we're in the Particum universe, which is the based Mijan universe, and that has a counterclockwise spin. So we came out of the Eka on the counterclockwise spin this way. When we activate these, we will create the opening of these codes, and the slow way to do it, to get up here slow, where you get to stop at each place and see what goes by, like see Tara, see Gaia, those kind of things, is you would do the natural counterclockwise spin. When you want to get out of here fast, or you need your flame body activated fast, you open these, and it allows for a clockwise spin that brings them all together really fast and brings them into the center. So what we're doing is really folding up our hologram and taking it with us into a higher space. And we're just doing it the fast way. Where if you do it the slow way, you have all this long progression of what appears to be linear time, where the hologram changes piece by piece and one moment leads to the next. When you roll it all up, you pop up someplace else. And it ought to be interesting to see what this looks like for those of us who actually get to do this physically. It's going to be if you do the death transition, it's almost like from here you're expected to be able to have some weird experiences once you get out of body, so it won't be so traumatic. Oh, okay, I'm going to pop up in that time frame, no problem. But if you're taking your body with you, it could be a really weird experience. And that's what some of us will be able to do by the end of all of this. Next one, please. I'm hurrying. I will shut up soon, I promise. I only have a couple more. These are the important ones I want to get to. Okay. Now, this is showing you, again, these would be those codes, those Vekas on this level, on the universal level would be the Vekas. And they were the ones that are in the shields running between the nodes. This is simply showing you in relation to your own body and in relation to your radial bodies. Remember, you have your density 1 radial body. I always go nuts with this one. Density 1 radial body is here. I think, no, density 1 is here. Density 2 is here. Density 3 is here. And your density 4 is here. And your density 5 radial body is there. They're all in a different angular rotation of particle spin axis. As you activate these codes, you open up all of the frequencies between them. So all of the radial bodies and those that would go with your parallel self roll up into one big energy body. And this is all occurring at the same time as you're activating your Merkaba, activating DNA, activating your shields, all that. They all go hand in hand. Chakra activation, your main vertical current expanding, your celestiline being produced in the DNA, etc. Okay, next one, please. This one just shows you correspondences. We've already covered this in Dense for Love. This just shows you where, now here you have your Veka codes. They open up between the Veka universal systems and the Eka, the inner Eka. The Eka codes open up the Eka inner system to the next level up, which is the Akasha God world. The scepter codes open up the Akasha God worlds to the Akasha Aya God worlds. The Templar Ruche codes, or the Ruche codes, open up the Akasha A to the Akasha Aya, highest God world, and there's one more level that they just introduced that we don't even have the diagrams over there. Paper wasn't big enough. But they're called the Christ codes, and they open up the space between the Akasha Aya God worlds and literally those two templates, the Christos and the Christala templates up there for the full expansion into Source. Now, this just shows shield correspondences as well with the Veka codes. Now, in our lower Veka worlds, we have the Maharic shield. All right, and then activate the Vekas, opens Maharic shield to receive the frequencies from above, which is the Rishaic shield. When you have a fully activated Rishaic shield, you can actually pass into the inner Eka worlds. Then you have the Eka codes that correspond to opening this world. This is called the Ionic shield level 1. Corresponds with the Akasha middle God worlds. And as you begin working with the Eka codes, you finish activation of this, and you start activation of this. When you work with scepter codes, it starts the activation of this going downwards and this one going upward. This is the Ionic shield 2. That's the Akasha Aya shield level. The Ionic shield 3 is the A, and the Akasha Aya over here. All right, so this is just the shield connections, the part of your shields that are connected to each of the parts of the Stairway to Heaven, and the code levels that we're using to activate the lock keys that will open the locks between each of those worlds and each of those parts of your anatomy. And as you do this, you build the flame body that we'll get into tomorrow. Now, we've worked with the Veka codes. We almost have all 12 Veka codes entered in. And see, we have to wait for the Earth to get ready to activate them too. We can't activate them if the Earth hasn't started their activation. And the Earth has to wait for Parallel to start activation. And that has to wait for Tara, and that has to wait for Gaia, and that has to wait for Aramatana, and that has to wait for the Iani up in the Eka inner worlds to open the gates there to set the whole process in motion. So there's a whole cosmic clock effect where it's all timed as far as bursts of frequency releasing as gates open, all in a synchronized kind of dance with each other. But this is just showing you the correspondences. Now, scepter codes. The scepter codes are part of the Ionic 1 and part of the Ionic 2 shields. These open this space here between the Akasha and the Akasha A. The scepter codes begin the process also when they start to activate of triggering up activation where they start to activate the Ruche codes that allow for frequencies from here to pass down or frequencies from here to pass up. We're being given the scepter codes, and we're going to be given probably one of the Ruche codes, if not the highest one, number 12, in Dance for Joy, not because we're going to run away from home and run all the way back up to the Ekashe world, but because the 12 Ruche pillars from the highest level are needed down here to help anchor this system for what's called the ARC project that we'll talk about primarily on Sunday. That's literally the universal rescue mission that's going on here. And some of the people who are capable of holding these flame body activations will collectively help to anchor those arcs into the planetary grids so this planet can make the transition without falling into the black hole system. We are being given the scepter code 12, that will open the whole set of scepter codes below it. It's beginning the process of running the 12 pillars into the body. Now we have to set the anchoring ones here too, and that's what we're doing working with the Vekas. So at this point, and working with them is easy. At this point, it's just optical pineal induction for most of them, where what you do is you have two currents of energy coming out your eyes. Right now they're twisted when they shouldn't be. So you cross your eyes, you look at a thing, you inhale it all into your pineal. You cross your eyes for one purpose. It brings the two currents into one powerful current in the center, and it undoes the cross, the twist that's not supposed to be there, and it brings it back into the pineal as the mathematic that it's supposed to be, instead of half the mathematic and half of a reverse. All right? So anyway, that just shows you shields in relation to the codes, in relation to the worlds. Next one, please. This one, and this was really hard to see when it was black and white. This was in, I think, the Dance for Joy one. Not Dance for Joy, the Dance for Love one. But what it shows you is, all right, your Cathara grid, right, the Cathara grid. This is where the 12 Ruche pillars anchor in relation to any Cathara grid. All right, that goes right from, we take it all the way up to the first level of creation when we looked at the Akasha Aya, where it showed the 12 Ruche pillars and their positions in the Cathara grid. That means that those positions will be the same in any Cathara grid all the way down the whole setup. It means it's the same in your body. So these are the Cathara centers, the bigger ones. All right. These little guys are the Ruche, which is the God Seed core, the Akasha core. You have center point, which is the Amaraya flame point, that center point of your Cathara grid that connects directly through the ekas all the way up to source. And these are the Ruche again. You have 12, 3, 6, and 9, the original and the strongest points, and then you have the smaller ones that emanate out from it. And it creates that pattern, the Ruche pattern. And when it activates in the body, it activates in these positions. So if you know the positions in the body where the Cathara centers are, you can tell where the Ruche pillars anchor and open in the body. When they open in the body, they begin the expansion of these wild-looking wave fields, like wings in the body. This is where the real concept of angel wings came from. Angels have their halos activated, and they have their wings activated, and they float on clouds of energy. And they have long dresses that are often shaped like triangles in drawings and things. This is really what angel symbology used to be about, and it got hijacked into meaning something other than what it was intended. But the activations we're doing will begin this process of activating the Ruche pillars. Before the pillars can anchor in the body, these flames have to anchor in the body. The 3 flames, which means the Rishaic shield, has to activate, and then pass that down to the Maharic shield, and pass that down through all of the lower levels of the shields. So this is the process that just shows where the Ruche pillars fit into your body. Next one, please. Am I talking fast? No? It's funny. Some people think I am, some people think I'm not. We all hear at a different speed. It's kind of funny. This is the last phase of this stuff. Yeah. It's just these were a disaster because I'm trying to do the things that need to be typeset for the additions to the book, and they were all scribbled on all over with the marker, but nail polish remover gets it off, fortunately, so I could resurrect them long enough to do the presentation. Anyway, we've seen this one in basic form without the little red spots on it in, I think that might have been Dance for Life. That was a very early diagram that was given. It shows the 12-strand DNA. It shows your incarnate strands down here, density 1 strands, your soul strands, your oversoul strands, and your avatar strands, 1 through 12. And here it shows the progression of building what's called a biveka Merkaba, A biveka Merkaba is the avatar Merkaba, is the 12-strand Merkaba. And it's called biveka, meaning bivector. It can go 2 vectors, angular vectors. It can go vertically, and it can go horizontally. What it can't do is go diagonally. Now, if you notice or remember in the positions of the Veka worlds in the Veka map, you have vertical, you have horizontal, and then there's this other little one over here in the inner Eka. It's at a diagonal. To get into the Eka system, you have to be able to have a Merkaba that's capable of shifting into the diagonal axis. It's a 45-degree shift as opposed to a 90-degree shift, an angular rotation of particle spin, and also the axis angle of the Merkaba itself. So in the early days, they were teaching us how to begin the building of this Merkaba, where it's phases. You have the density 1 phase, which is called the Nethra phase. Then you have the density 2 phase, when you get this capsule, this spiral going and this spiral going, the one on top. That's the Hala phase. Then you had Quatra phase, and you had Mahanta phase, which is the D12. Then there's this one called the Rahanta phase. It's the Rishik Merkaba. And I remember when I was putting this graph together, it seems like a million years ago, that it was like, this was the objective. If we did really good in this lifetime, maybe we could get this activated. But never even thought we'd be doing stuff to activate the Rishaic Merkaba, but that's what we're doing. Now, the Rishaic Merkaba is called a Triveka Merkaba, and this is what I believe, was it Dance for Love? It came in where we talked about the Akasha Merkaba, the 12-plane Merkaba, where it's bigger than these, and it's based on a different shape, an expanded shape. Can we go to the next one, please? Okay, now, we've seen this part of this diagram before. That is the Triveka Merkaba, or the Akasha 12-plane inner Earth Merkaba vehicle. That is the minimum type of Merkaba that holds the minimum speed and rotational ability to get through one of the gates to go into the ecosystem or anywhere higher. What we didn't see in that diagram, now this is the bottom point. This would be the bottom spiral. It looks like an umbrella, doesn't it? Yeah. And this is the top spiral. This is the magnetic spiral that would be coming up this way, and this is the electrical spiral that would be coming down this way. It's actually based on the shape. The shape beneath it, and each one of them, is actually the Christos Crystalla shape of the Cathara grid. And the proportions are very specific. When we did these, the math on these, the diagrams are kind of rough versions of it. But they're very specific proportions to each other. That means the Cathara grid itself has very specific proportions. It's not just you can draw it any shape you want it. There's actually, it's all mathematical. But this is the Akasha Merkaba that we need to generate to get into the inner Eka worlds. But there's a level of activation of this Merkaba that creates what is called the universal Veka Amareya flame body. And inside of it, the Eros flame body. Now, this flame body is the result of progressive activation of each of the 5 levels of radial body, where it's the polarity of the radial body, triamiash field, is dissolved, and it turns into one radiant flame body that opens into the next level. So we're starting with the activations tomorrow that begin the process of first density 1, then density 2, then density 3, then density 4, then density 5 release. All right. Normally it's been a long time between each one of these. Years. But this is the crash course because this is needed on the planet. So they're giving it to us. What it will do is activate this Merkaba very quickly, but it will begin the building around the outside of this, of what's called the universal Amareya flame body. And around your little body being here, this thing is called the silver sanctum, the pale silver Christos flame body. That is the result of taking what's called the Eros field, that's part of your radial body field. It's composed of D7 and D5 polarized energy. Depolarizing that, and 5 plus 7 gives you the 12. It brings the Christos frequencies directly into activation within the body. That's where the main vertical current expands out to become the internal and external Maharic seal and all of that. So what we're building is this. What this looks like is, next one please, and I think this is almost the last one. We've seen this one from the Dance for Love too, but we didn't see where the flame bodies fit into it. Now this form here is called the crux and seta. All right. And basically it's an Ankh shape. The crux and seta field is generated by progressive activation of each of the shields. You have your Maharic shield, your telluric shield, your telluric shield, your Doradic shield, your Turic shield. Then this one that runs on a vertical plane is your Rishaic shield that goes at density 5. And this one here is your Ionic shield. And beginning activation of the Ionic shield is what allows you to do all sorts of axes, because this one actually flips this way. It rotates on all axes, where it can go in any direction at all. We're beginning the process now, and soon to finish it because we're going into activation of this, but we have to activate the one that can go vertical and diagonal. The Rishaic shield can shift to this angle, but this one can shift to all the angles, which means once the Ionic shields fully activate, you can travel up and down through all of the Stairway to Heaven God worlds. So that's the ideal, that's the real hour. Like where's the end of the finish line? That sounds like a good place, at least to sit down and rest. But for now, we're still in here trying to figure out how to get our Merkaba working and our shields activated. We're doing pretty good, though. I mean, this is crash course stuff, and I'm just amazed at how people, even like this, oh, whoa, that was a lot of information. You kind of like want to fall over and sleep for 2 days after you get out of one of these workshops. And when you do, then you can't remember hardly anything you learned, but you go for the technique. Well, at least I know I can do that. What do I do? All right, what does it do? I'm not sure, but I know it was important. If that's what it takes right now, that's okay. There'll be a time when we'll know and we'd be able to rattle this off. You'd be able to give this presentation off the top of your head. I would too, without diagrams, without anything. But right now, that's not for anybody, any of us. We're lucky that we can hold the megabytes in our mutated little DNA that can even get us to the point where we remember that techniques are important, why ever. At least if we use them. We are actually creating these activations. Even if we can't remember what we're activating and what it does, it's all part of the Ascension program. So if your brain gets tired with detail, that's okay. Let it. Get enough to know, okay, yeah, somewhere. When you do this, every time you look at one of these graphs, you're actually giving the mathematical encoding of all of the information stored in it. So all the stuff that runs out my mouth in really fast speed when we're pointing at these is actually encoded in digital form into the diagrams themselves. And when you look at the diagram, you're picking it up. It's in your fields now, and that will stimulate your own memory of it. You'll remember the parts most significant to you. So this is what we're building. Once we get the Rishaic shield activated and the beginnings of the Ionic shield, it creates outside of our natural radial body capsule this flame body. This would be the emerald flame of Amareya. That internal flame that comes down in the center of our Cathara grid when we activate expands outward, and inside of that the Christos flame expands, and it literally gives our auric field, the auric field progressively loses its levels of division, and that means the consciousness levels progressively reunify and come into the body, and it turns into what looks like a big silver akasha shape thing, like a teardrop shape, and around that is a very beautiful emerald blue-green flame, which is the color of the depolarized trion Miage Rion field. This is what we're working to build, and tomorrow we'll find out just how tiny this big one is. Remember, we're here, right? These are our fields and what they do when we activate this stuff. Remember that diagram that had the auric field and showed all the dimensionalized levels? Well, that all goes away and turns into this, but we're going to find out tomorrow what this is a part of. So we see the end of the finish line. They just gave us this in France, and it's still literally in, I'm hoping to have it typeset before you leave, so you can at least get a copy of it with maybe some typeset words on it, because right now it's handwritten. But it shows you where this fits in the whole flame body. The entire structure of the entire flame body, going all the way up to it one with source, is referred to as the Eukatharista body. EU, Cathara, Ista. All right. Now the word Cathara, we learned in the Cathara healing course, was light, sound, one. The EU refers to its point, an imperfect union. Kind of like there's various translations of that. But in this context, the Eukatharista means light, sound, one, unified, and the Ista refers to manifest. So it is the wholeness of God, the light, sound, one, manifest in form. The Eukatharista body is what we're working to build, building the different levels of the Amareya flame body, the Eros flame inside, and then the different levels. You have the Veka Amareya, which goes up to D15. Then you would have the Eka Amareya that would go all the way up through the dimensional structure of the Eka worlds. Then you have the Akasha Amareya, you have the Akasha A Amareya, the A Amareya, and the Ea Amareya. And eventually you get into your Christ template. There's another set of codes that they didn't even tell us about before. The last 12 that are called the Christ codes, that after you do the Veka codes, the Eka codes, the Scepter codes, and the Rushe codes, the Christ codes open up the main Christos template, the Christos and the Christala. At that point, I don't even think we're going to have to worry about that. I think we can get through on probably Akasha A level activation, but this is part of a bigger structure. But fortunately, the structure does stop somewhere. So we at least get to see where these flame bodies fit and the more detailed structure of the flame body, because we have to take it each level of activation at a time. People that are going to light body classes, I feel bad for them. Because, at least if it was like a 15-dimensional light body, it might be fun to play with. But these guys are just being taught how to activate the Metatronic code in the body so they can activate the net field, so they can have a finite existence for a while and be absorbed by a shadow dancer. Absorbed means you will always have an externally seeming creator God telling you what to do or you're afraid of, and you will never be able to integrate your consciousness. The light body alone isn't enough. It's the flame body that people are looking for when they go to light body classes, but they don't know that. One of the biggest barriers that the other side likes to put up to these teachings is saying, oh, they're fear-based. They talk about scary stuff. Yeah, like us, right? What they don't like is we're revealing them, and we're revealing them at a level that shows the whole paradigm, where you can see where they've taken pieces and you can see where they're distorting things. And they don't have coherent systems to show where everything fits together, how the numbers work and all that kind of stuff. And ours does. So there's a lot of resistance to this. If you get excited about the fact that you have a flame body, you figured out where it is in your anatomy again, and now you're learning how to activate it, and you want to go tell the world, they're probably not going to listen. Most of them don't want to know. If they do, for some reason, they find the vibe, either of the books or a workshop coming up or somebody else that's involved, and you'll find you that way. But broadcasting it from the top of the hills, you'll just get stones thrown at you at this point because of all the resistance the others have put up, and it's really sad. And then I will leave you to the rest. Back to this. Back down to Earth. All right, we've seen this diagram before, but without the little starry-shaped things and without the red blobs. Now, when we talked about the nodes, remember those 12 circles that are in your shields, and then you had the vector codes in between them. The nodes correspond, they hold the program, they're the body form of each dimensionalized level of consciousness, or each primal ray of consciousness that you're composed of. The part of you that is manifesting is that primal ray. When we look at the first 12 dimensions of your consciousness, we are looking at the 12 nodes. These are considered the capstone nodes in the 12-strand pattern in the manifest systems, in the dimensionalized manifest systems of matter. D12, D11, D10. D12 carries this one actually carries the Manu, the Ire, and the Mane force, God forces. And this is going back all the way up to the top. All of these are carriers. The rays are the carriers of those primal Mane, Manu, and Ire frequencies of God source, but broken down into smaller pieces. That's where the ray names and things come from. You have D12, D11, and D10 are the capstones for this Kathara grid, for your lower dimensional self. And the light field represent the capstones for the beginning of your flame body or your light body. The capstones, if you can find out these, it implies which one's these. You will have one of these that is your primary ray that you're using right now. It might not be the one you incarnated on when you first came into the matrix. There's a way that later, when we get to the DNA scan that we're going to teach you how to do before you leave, you'll be able to find your constant, which is the direct line you came from. But right now, you may be using some other frequencies to learn some other lessons. The things that the self-test that Az is going to take you into are finding which one of these three, first of all, is your Christic, because this goes with D12, the Christos level, your Christic capstone. Once you find the Christic capstone, you can tell which is your Rishic capstone, because the Christic capstones would have, over here, this would be the base Ire carrier, this would be the base Mane carrier, and this would be the base Manu carrier. All right, that implies whatever the Manu carrier, if you had this one, you found out that this one through the test was your capstone, your Christic capstone, it would imply that the Manu carrier and the one above was also the main frequency that you were running. And here you have the Manu carrier. Here, the main Manu carrier is there. So it would imply affiliation. No, wait a minute, I missed that one. Here, this is the Manu one. Pardon me, I get dyslexic sometimes. Now, this one, 11, if you find that this is your capstone, that's the man A carrier, that would be this one, D14. And the Ire carrier would be D15. So if you find these, which the test will show you how, it implies these, and there's various levels of interpretation of what this tells you about yourself right now, what frequencies are running, and we even got some new translation as far as interpreting it further. It will give you the ability to see some interesting things, just some insights. Also understand some of the lessons, because there are lessons, particularly life lessons, that go with each of these rays that you've actually been working on. And if you see these, you can kind of say, oh yeah, I can see how I was working on that one, that kind of thing. It helps to give some insight. And what we're going to do by the end of the workshop, I think it's technique 19 or something, yeah, we're going to learn to identify through this test that Az is going to give. Actually, you're going to give yourself, as translated it, but you're going to give it to yourself. You'll be able to find what's called your contact ray, which is a combination of 3 ray frequencies that represent the primary and most easily accessible path of communication that you are using right now, that's available right now in your body, between you and your higher levels of identity. So we're going to be taught how to begin activating through knowing your contact ray, activating certain frequencies in the body to begin connecting with your own parts of yourself that are in the Eka system. Okay, I think that's as far as I need to go. How bad I do? How bad did I do? I can't talk. Okay. Well, probably, I think we're going to be running over a bit tonight, yes? You're not going to run that much? Okay, well, if you need more time, we can put it in the morning, okay?
Okay, it'd probably be a good idea to take a 10-minute comfort break, not more than that. And when you come back in, on the back table, I hope Jane can make a space. There'll be 2 piles of paper, a big one with several sheets and a small one with only 2 sheets. Will you take just one each when you come back into the room? Yeah. By all means, start on the thick set if you want to, but as you gather, when you get to the end of page 1, it's saying stop there, wait there, if you want to read it. But don't go past page 1.
Yeah.
All right, 10 minutes then. So the first point of expression of source expresses as Ire, magnetic, and through the expression of Ire, it creates Mane. All right, it produces the poles in order to have something to compare with, and then steps down from that point. But it's nothing whatsoever to do with good and bad, because Source doesn't know the good and bad. It's only we and the way that we function, according to the way our templates have been messed around, that we have issues with good and bad. And that really relates to a bigger issue and a bigger question, which I'll talk a little bit about, which we refer to as the victim-victimizer game. The game that we have assumed a relationship with. So, choice, from this moment forward, choice as the Iani, the Yanas, and Source itself would have us consider it in this moment, right here and now, is to recognize the whole issue of this potential. You represent units of potential. You represent the self-same component of raw essence that Spark is, was, and always will be when you chose to come into incarnation to deal with the greatest healing experiment that this universe has ever seen. And to remember that as potential, you choose in the moment, and every moment that you consider, to recreate the process within yourself, because you are a part of Source, all of you, that you bring forward the Manu, the potential raw essence. From it you create E-ray frequency, from which you create Mane. Now I'm trying to link with what Ashana's been talking about, so you can see how we move into more of a 3D focus for a little while. We'll go through the test, and then we'll come back out up at Manu, Ire, and Mane language again. And we'll go back to rays, we'll go back to dimensions. But I want to take it from where we've been and step the thing down and bring it into a here and now kind of issue area, because here and now issue areas really need to be sorted out, because too many people aren't getting it at that level. Too many people are still having struggles, still experiencing conflict, confusion, uncertainty, and a need to express externally too many of the issues, questions, and things that they should be developing quieter confidence about going inside to resolve. Okay? Because if we don't insist in a kind of way of presenting certain kinds of information in a firm, loving fashion, which is called the tougher love end, how on earth will anybody convince you or encourage you to recognize that the prerequisite of moving into any of the other levels of expression presupposes that if you're going to play with this, which is another word for love, right, it implies responsibility for what you do with it. Because all of this is playing with power. The more you learn, the more you understand, the more you approach the whole point of expression, the more it implies responsibility of ever-increasing gravity. But it also suggests that as you do that, you do it with a lighter heart. It challenges you to combine two things which in 3D seem contradictions in tones, but yet they go hand in hand. Now, the thrust behind this questionnaire thing, it began some while ago. In fact, it amuses me when I reflect on this that the tiny number of people that ever actually came to a workshop of mine, which is a model of all manner of fascinating things, the very 6 years ago I think it was, the very first one I was talked into through a whole series of symbolic language affected by one person who told me I was going to teach spiritual stuff, and I said, no way, not in a million years, I'm not going to do that. Oh yes you are. And this lady showed up every time I went to Sainsbury's in Newton Abbot. Every time I went there, she was there saying, when's it going to be, when's it going to be? Anyway, in the end, I got kind of confident of doing it and contrived this booklet. And it was all right. But on the morning of the workshop, at about 4:45 in the morning, I remember it so well, it was like, get up now, get up now, get up now, and go to your desk, which I did. And one of the first times I'd done it, I was asked to do. And what happened was a whole argument, which is a greater expansion of this, came out. And that was my kind of aha, in a way, because I understood what that was telling me beyond the words. And through the process of that engagement, I actually made some kind of connection with my own higher parts and with Source and with other friends of mine. And this whole sequence of relationships started to become more and more a part of how I adjusted my perception, the way that I was looking at the world, the way I was looking at how I was having energy and power flow through my life. And it was leading me towards recognizing that there was a responsibility that I should take for everything that was occurring. And right then my life was the biggest mess you've ever seen. on every level. And through that coincidence of events, if you like, it was provided to me to understand certain things about the perceptual issue, right? The perceptual relationship, my relationship with the manifest environment that I was creating. Nobody else was doing that. I didn't know about a party then. I didn't know about personal shields then. And I didn't even understand either that the 20,736, a party that exists in our personal shields, relate to the 1,728 elements of ourselves in individuation at all the 12 dimensions. In other words, if you divide this by 12, you get 144, and you find that they actually express all the way up through the dimensional levels. So that this whole question of the witness questionnaire is a questionnaire designed largely by Ma and the other Ayani, based on something I did 6 years ago. And it's designed to invite answers from all of the parts that you call you that exist now in individuation. And what it's designed to do is to trick them to provide answers to questions, which is why you'll have not much time to actually answer them either. To trick them to come forward and express whatever ego is on their lower level, whatever corresponds to their own level of lower ego. It tricks them into expressing themselves so that we can get a nail. We can see where they are, and what they're doing, what level they're working at. So if you have aspects of self, which are referred to as shadow, but they also happen to be parts of your own soul group, and if they're being messed with, then what we do is that we will see a particular level of scoring in, say, D1, and that will have an expression either as Ire Mane or whatever. Well, it's not. It's Ire Mane, and Manu is 1, 2, 3. But we'll actually find out where the shadow influences and shadow downstream attachments are as a result of the way the quiz is structured, the way the beloved has actually helped us to move it forward. It takes us through what we think of as 3D psychological analysis of a sort, and it moves us right into multidimensional expression and pulls forward all of those lower ego aspects so that we can see where they are, and once we can see where they are, we can start to focus on them. And this brings up a point, and the point is this, that I'll read the section, but I think in it they were wanting to remind us that whilst techniques are being provided of ever escalating sophistication and impact, that the greatest technique that exists is the one that we create for ourselves. And that is the one that Ashana was given before we were even 5 or 6 years, 7 years from meeting each other, and the one that I got immediately after the period when I got the transmission about the energy as consciousness thing. It's called the Mentor Technique now, and it's published in Kathara Manual. And that process was one in which both she and I were helped to understand that there were higher aspects of ourselves, say at oversoul level, both overshadows of both her and I at that time, were ready to participate in accelerating the process of overriding the programs contained in the apathy within the personal shields. Although that language wasn't used to me then, and it wasn't used to her either. But we were helped to understand that there was a proposal there, if we were willing to accept it and be true to it, which is no different from the proposal that exists between Yoni Christos and Rishik Self now. No different at all. Right? And what we were given to understand was that it was perfectly possible to experience living as if we were sitting just behind our own heads on the right. That aspect of the oversoul and even any of the Yoni guardians would come in from around here, up around there, okay? And both she and I have compared notes, and we both actually get in the position almost in exactly the same place. The kind of intimation about the possibility and how it would work was almost the same, almost identical. And we grew quite quickly to recognize that there were certain areas of our lives which we were having be dysfunctional and that we could change them. All right? And what we did, she did some slightly different things because her issues were altogether different from mine. But it came to the same. And that was making a kind of a commitment from one's own, what we nowadays call the Azare. When we come to do the techniques, you'll know that the Azare is here. Okay, it's often referred to as the etheric heart, but it's much more than that. But from that point, we were making a commitment in the physical to changing certain things that were present in our lives and that we realized were blocking and holding us back. And that relationship works where the oversoul, or whatever level you're working with, will accept your invitation to point out to you when the insights that you know that you have, the choices that you know that you can make, because bear in mind, we're all aware when we make an inferior choice, aren't we? We all know what the higher choice is, but we will tell ourselves all manner of reasons why we can't make it. Yeah? We all do it, to some degree. We all do. I know we do. And so this process brings you to a point where the role is that aspect of yourself will remind you gently and lovingly that you understand both the gravity and the potential. Both the gravity and the potential. You know it's there. When you leave places like this, and you leave friends visiting a weekend, you go into this place where you get lonely and separated and liable to be picked off by the shadow and the shadow dancers. What we were given that time ago was a kind of an antidote to that process that was upcoming that we didn't know existed, neither she nor I. And that there is no condition except the one you make, and that is that you do acknowledge that there is a higher choice, that you can know what it is, you recognize it as essence flowing from source, the little bit of frequency that is dribbling through your compromised shields, and that you agree with yourself you will use it. Because every time you don't, you deny source. And if you deny source, what does that make you? Don't make me say it. You can all talk about Anunnaki and Drax, the heart's blooming content, but if you deny source, what does it make you? No better than them. And that's why we're in the pickle that we're in. And why we come here, discuss all this stuff, get our heads around really complicated technical data, just to remind ourselves, to show us over and over again the substance and the proof in what you already know. In your heart, at least you do. Sorry, I won't berate you anymore. It's the Americans are quite accustomed to, or some of them are anyway, at least they see the J the B kind of thing coming out, the JB life that I had. And it gets all fiery and wacky. Anyway, Ma would like me to read to you the thing that we composed together for Bermuda last July. And it was a presentation that was entitled Paradigms, Paradox and Parachutes. And so I'll read. Now, when I refer to anything to do with contact and Iani, and this is specific to a course that was bringing people into a pre-apprenticeship, basically, to who were seeking to form a relationship with Iani in order to become an active part of what is known as the ARC project, which will be talked about to some degree during this weekend and what it contains. But in this context, when I say anything like that, I want you to remember that contact of any kind is supposed to be expressed internally. The Iani, in any case, are only aspects of your future self. They are you in some other future time space. They're not anything different. It's you we're talking about, right? Just to be clear, right? It goes as follows. The fundamental essence of the contact course is the successful preparation for effective partnership with a GA Iani mentor and, as a primary result of that, accelerated integration of one's own 1,728 parts existing in individuation and ultimately full integration of one's own Christos self. Both, quotes, successful preparation and, quotes, effective partnership imply initiative, persistence and leadership, as well as a number of other apparently elusive qualities associated with, quotes, humans and the 3D holographic program current on Earth. Whilst open community leadership may well form the destiny of some course participants, and they're talking here about leadership in the ARC project sense, right? It is the issue of self-leadership which is of greatest concern, and which, if taken seriously, represents the quintessential key to satisfying the conditions of and incomparable potentials associated with Iani contact, Christos contact, and the personal service agreements which lie within and beyond such contact. In other words, the reason for wanting contact has to do with the agreements and contracts you've already made that they will gracefully assist you with, provided that you shape up in the right kind of way. This course generally presupposes the willingness to identify and accept the need for the responsibilities inherent to true self-awareness, not lip service to them, since the latter would guarantee little more than a limited degree of excitement, temporary social notoriety, and a substantial amount of additional negative karma. However, willingness alone is insufficient to successfully address the relationships between the subconscious, the shadow self, and the conscious self, so intricately and deeply set as cellular programs that true self-awareness has, in all truth, proved an impossible ideal for all but a very tiny minority of humans in physical embodiment at this time. The spiritual path and New Age movement is littered with good intentions. In fact, it is driven by overdressed derivatives of good intentions, cloaking power-sucking paradigms based on externalized saviors, and often not much else. From such origins are those who, by virtue of their own denial patterns, fail to see the Ianis, parentheses, and the speakers, love in the Azurite Melchizedek Cloister Emerald Order Freedom teachings. Even adherents of these AMCEO teachings are sometimes prone to patronize others who, quote, don't get it, posing the question of exactly who is getting or not getting what. Similarly, there are others who feel that to develop a highly articulate relationship with this work somehow accords status, a position of power holding, and thus judgment born in the brackets or parens superior guise of benefactor or teacher. And just as there are these and other kinds of victimizers, like those who claim GA contact at the expense who believe it shouldn't be so easy, there are the victims, ready and willing to play out their powerlessness programs in order, perhaps, that we might all spot and learn from the issues more quickly. It would seem something of a contradiction in terms then, if not an outright paradox, that the freedom teachings fail to address this question of self-leadership at the 3D behavioral level, since it is the most fundamental of issues and a prerequisite to not only successful contact, but also multidimensional transmutative ascension itself. However, from the earliest times, and this is a reference to Angelic Reality's protocols for contact, the GA representatives make totally clear that contact presupposes 50-50 effort, you and they, beginning with yours. There are techniques there, just as there are techniques here, 19 all told this weekend. But what the GA were referring to wasn't simply, here, use these techniques for 2 weeks and we'll see you in your dreams. Then, just as now, they are inviting you to develop a technique of your own, tailor-made to deliver the quality of intention in action, in capitals, associated with personal contact, which would befit the most personal partnership or union of spiritual heart and mind. Why would anyone suppose it meant anything less, given the nature, circumstances, and immense potential of such a development? The greatest gift is the one you give yourself, and the Ayani know it, and the Ayani know it would be a huge disservice to interfere with your active understanding of that. Regrettable as it may be, however, the lesser gifts of the fallen legions, and particularly the Anunnaki and their Illuminati placemen, abound in this on every level. The challenges we each face range from the effects of genetic mutation and fragmentation, parens including loss of soul connection after birth, close parens, to the inherited karma from one's parents, to the victim-victimizer control framework, otherwise known as the socio-economic structure into which we're all born, and more common than is often realized, the effects of attempted field infiltration, and sometimes successfully, from one's earliest years. To complete a very sophisticated long-term strategy indeed, a plethora of vacuous paradigms, bracket belief systems, designed to ensure that the spirited, kind, but disaffected members of contemporary society have every reason in the world to lay responsibility for their lack of meaningful understanding and source-directed self-leadership potential on ascended masters, angels, gurus, anything and everything outside of themselves, keeping them from the greatest prize of all. And we all know what that one's about. They go on to say, we speak of victory, and this is where it lies. The techniques given in this course, if used persistently, will meet the technical requirements of the less accessible issues, the more difficult things to get access to, for most everyone. But the ultimate prize lies within the further preparation of the emotional, mental, psychological aspects of self. For without such preparation or healing, one offers the Ayani little more than a well-intentioned, albeit innocent, ignorant virus of the cosmic internet. And as an aside, I'll tell you that there was more on this whole subject, which was where Maha was helping other people understand through me what that implication was about what collective consciousness really means, and the way that the inner earth Ayana and the higher expressions of those have a what we think of as a mind link. All right. And that's a collective mind link which can be accessed as if it were a library by everybody. But anybody that enters and forms that link with the Ayani necessarily contributes directly from their own field, from their own shield, into the group shield. I mean, like you probably wouldn't realize, but when you come to a workshop like this, one of the first things that Ashana and I work on in the first few hours is to establish a unified group shield. If you went to Inner Earth or to any of the other worlds, right, you couldn't be there without integrating into that community or group shield. And whatever you carried in your field, you would splice into theirs, and therefore everybody would instantaneously have what you've got. Right? If you've got serious imbalances on a psychological, emotional, mental, or spiritual level, you would splice it into their shield. And that isn't what I think of as a spiritual gift. You know, they are too graceful to put it into those kinds of words. But that's what they're talking about here. To prepare for contact partnership, to move consciously into the ARC project, which will be discussed later, represents your first major and conscious act of creation, which you incarnated to do. And to do that, you have to feel the power to achieve it. And there's the rub. Because you don't. Why don't I have it now? Who took it? Why can't I get it back? Am I not worthy? Because without it, I'm nothing. Dead in the water. In 3D, losing is dying. Winning is living, right? That's the victim-victimizer principle running through this. Power, or more accurately, powerlessness, is the core issue shared by all humans. It is imbued, programmed deeply into the collective psyche of planet Earth and all its species, and it is no accident. We think of DNA mutation and genetic compromise with no conception of the self that exists prior to such fragmentation. Worse still, we know little of the coping mechanisms adopted since we were born, this means. The strategies and masks that work subconsciously to hide the powerlessness which our shadow selves make all too real. We hide a supposed weakness and powerlessness in lies, Self-deception, ambition, anger, competitiveness affected piety and material or spiritual superiority. Biologically, the body vehicle has been prepared to serve an anti-Christos agenda. Our own actions, together with those of the fallen legions, have caused major changes. Molecular compaction, parens miasms, or what's otherwise called karma, neurological compression, mutations in higher brain function, cutting ours and the planetary grids off from the primal life force, cutting ours and the planetary grids off from primal life force currents, and thus our own higher identities and soul fragments. Air traffic control of the self is no longer in the multidimensional hands of the office of the Christos, but in the 3D biological hypothalamus and midbrain, the palomammalian fight-or-flight department, the chemical hormonal driver of the D2 emotional body, theatre of the victim-victimizer drama. This is the office of the shadow and the chief executive lower ego, frightened, vulnerable, and desperately intent on holding what little power it has. The shadow knows and remembers what it means to have to cry for everything as a baby, to cry for food and get it, to cry for food and not get it, to cry for home to stressful and forgetful parents. Crying, or variations of crying, becomes a game to get things and not get things. So as we grow, we try out and adopt new games to get what we want a little more reliably, because we have grown so aware of our inability to feel safe, loved, fed, valued, respected. Compliant behavior becomes the principal mechanism for exchange of anything and everything: sex, money, status, privilege, comfort, and temporary spiritual identity, as does its counterpart: withdrawal of cooperation, love, affection, support, money, sex, friendship, status, and privilege. On a subconscious shadow and lower ego level, at the very least, the spoils of the game of life appear so great, so threatening, that the emotional body, and therefore the brain, assume a tremendous zeal, tenacity, and shrewdness in holding on to whatever it associates with survival, refusing to cooperate with anything that seems at variance with such necessities. On a conscious level, the illusions fed by the shadow expand to form masks for you to wear, designed to get what you think you most need in any situation. The masks of how you should be and must be eventually become the mask that you know as your true self. And I changed my life for that reason. I gave everything I had away in order to make myself come out. Don't go to those lengths. It isn't funny. The first adoption of mask behavior triggers the law of karma, expressed as the first time you lie, because you can't show yourself as who you are, and you pull the first thin little veil over yourself in fear because of what you suppose you project into the next moment, what's going to happen to you. You lie and you trigger the law of karma the moment you do it. Thus the life game grows ever more complex as old strategies fail under the weight of invisibly self-generated lessons. Involuntary shadow boxing, Maha's humor there, begins as the conscious mind tries hard to make sense of it all, considering new and different options, threatening the limited security of the lower mind. In adult life, the consciousness bobs and weaves around the spectrum of love and fear. Between rounds and bouts, each side of the match reviews strategy as best it can, fluctuating between victim and victimizer reasoning and various behavioral alternatives, in order to find a way to get what is desired, to hold what cannot be held. The ego digs in. In contemporary psychology, it's called repetition compulsion. And the conscious self reaches out, seeking a source to fix the pain, eventually to God or his angels. Further disillusion is unexpected of such innocent desperation, but it is nevertheless guaranteed. The lower ego lies in wait. It has learned about authority from its parents as retributional, unsympathetic, harsh, and often remote. It has also learned that God is the ultimate authority. Nevertheless, God, the masters, or the overworked lottery angels, are asked for help, since we wish to atone for our misdeeds, parens, whatever they may be, and pledge ourselves to useful service of mankind, if only my life is better. And of course, nothing ever seems to happen, because the law of manifestation doesn't work quite like that. But the funny thing is, it is at work regardless of what you choose. you're manifesting, you're creating all the time. Because you see, if you exist in ignorance, you're making choices which actually support the function of the aparti, and if you're running minimum level to get into the ARC project, that's 31% of your shield contains, let's say, a party that is polarized in favor of primal life force currents, which leaves 69% of your party. Who can figure 69% of 20,700 something? About 14,000 roughly. 14,000 incy-wincy bits of even a person who can actually take this stuff and move forward and even consider, or actually seriously consider becoming a part of the project. That's fairly advanced. So just think about how many of these little receptors, right, these little transceivers like you have that fetch the stuff into your radio and give you classic FM or whatever else, right? All these little chaps are all receiving different radio programs. But the radio programs are actually photosonic pulses. There are also flows of reverse polarity frequency coming into the shields. You exist in ignorance, right? You don't do anything but play these kinds of games. And what you're doing is keeping those open, and as you keep them open, what it means is that more of those aparti become overpowered by the dominant type of energy that's coming in. And that's what leads to monadic reversal. And that's what leads to permanent cording of the shadow dancer, which is much more serious than the shadow. So that was just a spontaneous variation from what we got here. All right, where are we? So we're creating all the time, right? In this behavior lies the fullest expression of powerlessness and the greatest denial of God, both at the same time. The thoughts and feelings associated with this God-fixed solution are inherently negative. Excuse me. And these accrete, that's what I was referring to, forming new negative forms of consciousness, mini-entities, which are the figments that Ashana was talking about, and we're going to do some direct work on those over the next couple of days. As you meander along helplessly hoping in this way, the underlying motive is fearful, and fear continually cuts you off from source, simply because the vibrational properties of fear constrict and contract. In the same way that we talk about frequency resonance, there is frequency dissonance. All right. So if you're occupying the way that you perceive the hologram from a fearful perspective, what you're doing is you're creating a resonance with reverse polarity frequency. Okay. If you're living life on a more even a simplified childlike level, when you're looking at the huge mess you've created for your own entertainment, and you start to tell yourself that what you've done is you've created this amazing theatre, right? That you first of all don't get too involved with and don't get to take too seriously. And even to live your life with a slightly flippant relationship with the world at large, because you can't yet move into a slightly higher space in which you begin to understand why you did that for yourself, right? You can still play that game with it. So what you're doing in that sense is shifting. You're moving your frequency, even when you do it that way, even if it sounds juvenile, you're moving away from a fear-based way of looking at it. And if you can move yourself into a comical perspective, which still contains a little fear, but isn't so much more fear-based, you're going to shift frequency. And the minute you do that, you'll pull more of a like frequency into your field. And that's what the techniques do, but in a much more concentrated way. But, if you go and do 20 minutes a day or every other day or once a week to do technique work, what this is all about, all of this preamble is about, is to try and create some degree of emphasis on how you actually occupy what you call time, moment by moment. I know very well that there are a number of songs that we've provided people with. There are a number of little ditties. There's a whole combination of magic and highly powerful words which are available and most people know. And without it being a trick question, I from time to time had the impudence to ask people how often, when they're doing the dishes or they're going to the bathroom or whatever, how often do they remember to celebrate the connection? Because each time they utter those songs, they're pulling high frequency into the party that can receive it, bouncing the reverse polarity of party out of the field, even temporarily, but making more room for that process to expand. It's partly remembering. It's partly also feeling the life that is inherent to the son, in the way that I sometimes bang on to people about the life that's inherent to the symbol codes that people see as a two-dimensional drawing, which it isn't. It's actually a thing, a being. It's a part of you. So, lots of paradoxes to play with. The experience that we're talking about here, about fear cutting off from source, denotes a lack of worthiness and exposes the fact that the self does not feel safe enough to rely on its emotional intuitive processes. And that is a reference to the aspects of the apartheid that are attuned to primal life force currents that relate to the soul, the oversoul, the avatar levels, and so on, to actually pull those in, to know they're there, to know what they do, to know what they're about, to not be afraid of the process, and have a positive, regular relationship with it. Because it's you're talking about. It isn't some remote thing. It's actually wanting to get to know yourself and your expanded self more and more naturally. So this idea of being a multidimensional being is a regular part of your self-awareness. And the way that you can spend your vacant time when you're not having to do what you do to earn a living, but all the moments within that occupation that you think, oh good, nobody's watching, I can go and do some of that. You know, you can go and play with yourself. And the more often you do it, the more obviously you pull in, and the whole process will go real fast. So if you incorporate that kind of attitudinal element, self-awareness, then the kind of impact that you'll get from the techniques will be absolutely phenomenal. It will really, really accelerate it. Very, very intense. And much smoother too, by the way. You'll feel less sort of, where'd my body go when I was doing technique 7? Will I come back? I hope not. So where are we? So anyway, this is we weren't feeling safe enough to rely on our emotional intuitive processes. The experience would therefore demonstrate, that is to say, the one that makes you feel you can't move into that space. And it dramatizes a lack of security and thus self-confidence, which either upscales the reliance on others and or encourages identification with false teachings and religions. This continues to form new expressions of powerlessness, particularly when combined with false spiritual teachings. As a result of the unconscious provocation of the shadow self, and often the miasms that they carry in their own shield, elements of the shield, the response of the spiritually conscious mind to transcend blame and judgment, the overall effect is to create a new mask, but this is one with a spiritual logo on it. Well, I thought it was funny when Mara said it. Anyway, meanwhile, if combined with the open heart, everything is perfect paradigm, the effort to transmute the unconscious provocation coming from the shadow side, driven as it is by fear, self-punishment, repressed anger, withdrawal of love and such, the new guise is nevertheless reinforced, since the core desire to redirect the potency of the hurt remains unsatisfied. It's like trying to get a suntan in the rain. The deep denial of source through a rejection of the nature of divine intention and an ignorance of universal mechanics grows more complex, more resolute, and therefore more difficult to shift. Source only expresses within itself, and so it is for humans. All that is outside is a device by which we learn, discover the nature of source, and practice working with that, and how the outside can indeed be changed, and eventually at will. That's what the worlds we're heading for do. If you want red hair or green hair this morning, you just do it. If you want to be extra tall, you just do it. If you feel inclined to wear a lovely sage green gown with silver embroidered on it today, you just do it. If you want to live a minimalist lifestyle in your lovely white cave, you just do it. That's how it is. Okay, we constantly create in the outside world all of the time through thought, speech, reaction, emotion, intent, action, opinion, and motive, driven by the auto-reflexes of the chemical hormonal body complex in contradiction, obstruction, conflict, unhappiness, lack, and conditional love. We persist in believing in our smallness, failing utterly to comprehend the power that is always ours. We all long for a different life and state of being than the one we know, born of a longing misinterpreted by our lower self, personality mask, ego, shadow selves. We carry a deep yearning for happiness and inherent misguided emotional belief that it is possible to create unity in a plane designed for games of duality. We are here to learn and remember. We are not here, specifically they mean here on earth right now, to fix anything but ourselves. And that implies that as we understand, that as we fix ourselves, through the healing of our own template, through the creation of expanded templates, which have to do with, he's talking about the ARC project here as well, as it comes to understanding how the templates, our fields, can be expanded and healed to an extent that they can become a vehicle for other dependent life forms from the other kingdom, whether it's plant, whether it's mineral. There are dependent life forms that are aware of the ARC project time coming, and they're looking at us to be a vehicle for their own means of ascending out of fear. That's just one example of what Ma's talking about in this section. The very nature of the duality hologram is designed to have you depend on others for life, instead of what I've just clarified. And since you must fight for what you consider life should be like for you, you fight for what you consider right, making unacceptable events and people wrong. When you discover yourself, with a capital S, and the role you play in this holographic game, you come into your own power. You realize that God doesn't act for you but through you. In this realization, you're no longer driven, quotes, by circumstance. It is the point of mastery, the belief in self as God, and the realization that you can deliberately use these powers of realization to expand more, express more, add more to Source's experience of itself. You must discover this power for yourself. If life, or God, forced you into your true birthright and saved you from suffering, you would never be free. Freedom means no force. So, we have a little page left to go, and then we're done with this, then we'll go and play with the quiz. Self-discovery must first occur on a mundane psychological level, and occur it must surely do. Because it is from this point of realization of the deep familiarity with and attachment to the mask you play with in the fight with duality. This has led to wholly erroneous notions of non-attachment, implied at-want-ment, spiritual extensions of fundamental unworthiness as distinct from the power to be, implicit in at-one-ment. Herein lies the potential to realize that you are master of your own universe, and this becomes only real to the degree that you master yourself. The lower self-ego will insist, however, that it must live in order to become. Quote, if everyone around me thought me special, better than most, talented, desirable, then I'll have the etc., etc., then I'll have the necessary approval, love, agreement I need, and that implies safety, in order to be myself and do what I want. As you work to give this up, your games and defenses, you will notice that your games and defenses are indeed initially a burden. Yet your fear will oppose their release. But nothing that remains in hiding can grow. Without the desire to treat all of yourself with honesty, nothing will change. And if you don't really like who you are and what you have created for yourself, the process will not work. Yes, I know, that's what I thought. Hello. So what they're doing then is they're really giving us a bit of a kick up the pants and saying, look chaps, you feel the impulse toward these things. We'll take all of the understanding out, taking all the filling out of the picture, taking all of the appropriate way of being skeptical about bunches of information being offered by this source and that source and that source, and just come to the simple sense of, I somehow feel I can change things. I can somehow feel that I can make things better. I can somehow feel that I can be a happier person, more useful person, have a better effect on people around me, any of those kinds of things that are, a sensible impulse. And that's the point. This is the higher aspects of self that are running primal life force currents, impulsing your fields, right? And they're trying to help you. I mean, this is what goes on in the expression or lies behind the idea of the wake-up or the wake-up call. It's an impulse that you don't necessarily understand where it came from or why it was there. But it's a feeling that you have that translates usually through the emotional and comes into the mental. And there in the mental you rationalize that, because if you get this impulse, it has to fit with how you're perceiving your reality. And you have to find a place for it to grow, right? So that this kind of process is what comes just before what the Yanni call the witness stage. And witness is just a name that they suggested that would sit between whatever wake-up means to people and whatever oneness means to people. And witness is a process. I mean, we've heard the expression back in the 60s, like being with it, getting with it, whatever. Well, and they often pick up on things that exist in the collective psyche anyway, because they know very well that they resonate. If it sounds familiar, people tend to work with something other than something that sounds strange. And what they're doing with this is just saying, look, when you start to really embrace the psychological and mostly emotional, mental component of wanting to harvest the fruits of what these techniques and the background teachings are giving you, is really, they're saying, look, recognize that as you make a shift to attitudinal embodiment, right, you're providing a better platform for the effects of the techniques. So if you just remember what we were saying about the mentor, the impulse to play with mentor idea that Ashana and I both had, that's what that was doing. It was helping us to make this conscious attitudinal shift in a different context. I mean, in a context that didn't have these extraordinarily powerful techniques, but the principle is the same. You have the choice to make. If you want to pursue the potential that we were showing you on the first film, if you really want to get the most out of the situation, then you make a choice that does the deal, that says, look, I know what the highest choice with available information is, and I am making a deal with myself, I'm going to do that. And I mean, do you understand what that means? I mean, I know there are some people who have had interesting shifts in relationships, but the minute you start to say, I will step into my power, it frightens the living daylights out of the people around you. And what do right away? They try and keep you where you were, right? And why is that? Because the victim-victimizer, the power exchange, you see, I mean, we call it victim-victimizer, but even giving it that label hides the idea, hides the reality that everything is energy, everything is conscious, right? Victim-victimizers to do with pulling energy as emotional acceptance, as affection, as inclusiveness, as in you're a nice person. Like, you come to my house for dinner, but I'm not having them come because they won't let me suck their energy. Games. But the minute you begin to recognize that you want to do this, and part of what Maha was saying in that piece that I was reading was, some of this baggage that you have that you don't want to have anymore, it generates fear in releasing it, and the fear is generated by the mirroring that other people do, right, of what you were trying to move away from. And you can get caught. You can get caught with these different kind of scenarios, and it can be a bit confusing. So you really have to get a bit clear and strong with yourself and say, I understand what this means to me. I value what lies at the other side of the process. I don't know how long it will take. How many people will accuse me of being hard and hurtful, or getting into a cult, or playing with scary stuff, But all the kind of ways that people will label you, chastise you, and in a small way persecute you in the way that some of us are persecuted on a much more obvious and visible level in other lives, there will be that entire backwash, and it will be utterly irresponsible of any of us that are speaking not to point out to you that we know what lies ahead of the next step, for those of you that haven't really engaged in bringing yourself into your full and true identification and insisting that you will know the power that is you, which is not at the expense of anybody else, because remember, if you want more of this, it applies responsibility increasingly. As you move up with increments of knowing and playing with this potential expressed as source frequency, you have a corresponding increment in responsibility for handling it with balance. It isn't a weapon, it's a privilege. And you have to remember that. So there's quite a lot to get sorted out in your head, right? So don't go for it too soon. I mean, you can sometimes really feel the push to step into that sort of space. But as you do that, you will find that people will teach you things. It isn't that you have got an insight and a realization, a strength, a willingness, a commitment to go there. Because every step you take is still in your hologram, which you have created to be instructive for your benefit. So as you change the image that other people see in the same hologram, their reactions, naturally enough, are going to shift too. And as they do that, you will learn things that will be helpful, if not to yourself right there in the moment, they will be helpful certainly to future times when other people have got the courage to do what you've been doing. And you can actually be supportive to those people because you've been through it, you anticipate, understand what ways people will try and hold you and keep the mask on that you've been wearing. and even accuse you of misleading them, because when you reach the point of saying, well, the person you married over here isn't the person you thought you married. You did that. You did that. You say, well, I didn't mean to. I didn't even know at the time it wasn't me, but, there you go. Well, here I am now. I want you to love me more because I got the guts to stand up and say so. No. You do the washing up twice as often. All right. Anyway, so what this does is it does this. It embeds sensory, perceptual, and behavioral aspects of your connection with connective consciousness, right? So you're beginning to recognize the need to shift isn't just to deal with the here and now and the miserable relationship we have with the hologram, but it's actually saying you're preparing through this to work on an individual and a collective level. You're beginning to demonstrate your awareness and your readiness to move into an environment that is open. Do you know the Aborigines tell us why the Westerners have lost their ability to be telepathic? Because we lie. And imagine what that means, because we lie. What does that mean? We're having a conversation, right? We're exchanging energy. I'm blocking, right? And the more I lie, the more I maintain the mask, the more I'm blocking the exchange. How can I connect with you? How can you connect with me? How can I, if I'm a liar, allow you to see all of me? Yeah, to see the little spots, my amazing spots in my shield that haven't been resolved yet. But bear in mind, you can go and play with the Iani with 31% plus of your party aligned with primal life force currents, leaving almost 2/3 of you with black spots everywhere, right? They understand that, and that can be worked with. But that is a sufficient minimum core for you to begin to move into this area. Okay? In doing that, it encourages the development of the arc mentality, or what we sometimes refer to privately when we're talking about the inner bridge zone mentality. Because you've all heard about, either through Voyager's books or other classes, about the bridge zone, which you've seen in graphs that appears as a graph somewhere out there. Has it occurred to any of you that the bridge zone is inside of you as well? Well, look, think of it. If you're inside and a part of source intrinsically, and if inside the source a bridge zone is being developed, where we're going to have to shift an axis from here to here and back there, it's happening inside of you too. And this is bridge zone mentality, okay? Yeah, well, right. Dealing with some of these issues now will actually provide coincidental benefits, because it's implying something about your willingness to bring yourself forward and move into a new level of spiritual maturity. That implies that you're you are able to embody a higher level of consciousness, which in turn means that your perceptual field, your range and depth is greater than it was before. So then, as will happen on some parts of the planet, you will see almighty examples of human suffering and almighty examples of human cruelty, one to the other, in your own lifetime. And one of the byproducts is that you will be provided with protection, emotional field and mental field. You'll be able to function more usefully as an enlightened being, providing assistance, succor, healing, comfort to others who need you. Okay? It will provide you with that. It'll keep you in the game for longer. Have you being an active, fruitful, constructive avatar presence for longer. Right? Because the people who don't have the maturity won't last 5 minutes. You can go and call Merlin or Thoth or play with your 3421 Merkaba, and all you do is accelerate the dispatch time. You're already boxed waiting to be taped and stamped, really. So these are the two things that really it all comes back to again, is about the more you play with this, the more power that you pull in, the more power you seek, the more responsibility it carries with it. I won't gild the lily over that one. All right, now, time to play with quiz, I think, because I've talked long enough. And I think, yeah, all right. This is all right. This is okay. If there'd been more time, we could have talked more about some examples of victim-victimizer games and what that's doing energetically, but we don't have time to do that. So then, with no disrespect whatsoever implied or intended, in a minute, since you've all got pencils, I'll ask you to turn to the questionnaire. Don't do it quite yet. Because of the situation we're going to put all of your parts in, you're not going to have much time to think. Because if we gave you time to think, then we'd give too much time for many of your different parts to come in and play games with others, which is what we don't want, right? We want to find out who's what, who's where, and who's not supporting you as much as you'd like them to, and who is in the area of strength, because that's what we'll discover. So 10 minutes to answer 96 questions, right? Now, we realize that you can make the same point over and over again and people remember different parts of the point, but you may recollect there's a paragraph in the piece I read. Don't start yet, that's cheating. Amar was pointing out that the tenacity of the lower ego is much, much greater, much more profound, and much cleverer than you realize. These B things really are a nuisance. And the reason why you've only got 10 minutes to answer 96 questions is because we know very well that if we give you more time, they'll be there, giving the questionnaire the answers they know the questionnaire is designed to have. Because some of these beings that are playing around are really very clever. 11.5 dark avatars are not dumb. And they have no trouble with 11 plus and Sat at Warren. They're very clever. And some of them don't want you to make these discoveries. Some of them don't want you to know about how to break shadow dance according. Right? If you successfully do that and exercise your sovereign right to express as the Christed being that you are, what do you think happens to them? They've got to find another Joe to attach to. And they're running out of time real fast. Okay. It is now a fraction before 25 minutes to 8. At 7:45, I will ask you to stop. So you're going to have to get there because you need to answer every question. So go, guys, and let the...